Carol Browner, President Obama's climate czar, went on television, every morning news program, and said, and I quote, virtually all of the oil is gone. That was not true. It wasn't true. It was a lie. It was a lie. And we've seen we know the documents that she was looking at. We know the scientists who worked on them. And what they found was the exact opposite of what she reported. 70% of the oil remained. 30% was gone. But the moment she said that, it gave sort of the whole country the ability to turn off their TVs and turn away, even though the oil was still there, even though the problems were still there and still are today, and the push for legislation ended.
Let me just interject this here. And, one of the most difficult things, that I've had to deal with, all the listeners out there have the same problem, I think, ever since President Obama took office. Where he could have gone on a lot of issues and how far he wanted to go and didn't go. At the beginning of his administration, when the entire country knew what the Wall Street casino had done to this economy, was the time right then to make sure Glass-Steagall was implemented. I think he could have gotten it through Congress because he had won this election. He had a mandate to do so. In this, he wanted the oil stop. We all wanted the oil stop. We wanted the Gusher stop. But it would seem to me that the administration, the second it stopped, it wanted no more bad press. It wanted to get back to its agenda, and they could care less, it seemed to me. And what Carol Browner did is exactly evidence that they didn't want, or really put it this way, they didn't really push for fundamental change to make sure this didn't happen again.
Exactly. I mean, the administration did an enormous effort of cleanup and personnel, and there were hundreds of people who did wonderful things.
And getting BP to pay up front.
Sort of. That they didn't really succeed in that. Only about $3.5 billion has been paid out by BP so far.
Good for you to flag that. Thank you.
But what the administration didn't do was stand up to the oil industry and make sure that there was significant lasting change, because the president's own commission concluded this was a systemic problem. This wasn't just a BP problem.
Right.
But what the administration allowed to happen is that business remains as usual.
Antonia Juhasz with us, author of Black Tide. Go out and see her at Pals tonight, Cedar Hills Crossing in Beaverton, 7 o'clock. Double question here. What should be done? What are the basic things, Antonio, that you think the government should be doing for that systemic change? And the second question is, was the president defeated, as all others seem to be defeated, by this nexus of politics and big oil?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start at the second part. My second book, the title, The Tyranny of Oil, came from an Obama speech. I believed very much in that he was going to come in and have the capacity to take on this industry, because he is not beholden to this industry.
Right.
He's beholden to other industries, but not this one.
Right.
What he found out coming in is that it is basically almost impossible to stand up to the oil industry, to go head to head with its money and its influence. And he allowed the industry to win. And what should have happened, what still should happen, based again on his own commission's findings, are that, one, we need vast, significantly greater regulatory oversight of this industry, money, personnel, skill. We need to be restricting where the industry operates, regulating how it operates, and really reining in its operations because it's pushed too far. Short of that, which we don't have, they shouldn't be drilling in the deep water.
That's right. Because,
they just shouldn't be doing it.
The people who approved applications, correct me if I'm wrong, just they weren't equipped to really understand what was involved, so they just accepted what the industry gave them, right?
And they were 2 steps away from a job with the industry, and that's the biggest problem.
Right.
There's this, there was lots
this
of
revolving
scandal.
door, which we see with the FDA, we see it at the SEC, we see it all over the place.
Yeah, and one of the most well-known scandals with the Department of Interior was the employees having sex and doing drugs and playing paintball with this sector.
That gets the attention.
That gets the attention. But it's symbolic of the deep interrelationship between the regulators and regulatees. But what we also learned from this whole disaster is the industry doesn't know how to do this. They don't know how to do deep water drilling.
They still don't.
There's just a lot of oil out there. If they can't clean it up, they can't do it. If they can't do it safely, they can't do it. Just as Keith Jones said, they were rolling the dice. They lost. His son lost his life. We gained 210 million gallons of oil that's still there.
You know what is really sad is that the opportunity that we had, and I referenced Wall Street for one, taking off the deregulation, Glass-Steagall, we had the perfect opportunity for the country was right there to learn that lesson. Same with healthcare. Same with oil here.
Yeah.
And how many disasters is it going to take before we have systemic change? Our guest, Antonia Juhasz, and I kind of misstated this earlier, you were author of 2 previous books. One, The Tyranny of Oil. The second called, the first book, The Bush Agenda, then The Tyranny of Oil,
That's right?
I read it as one because I just naturally think Tyranny of Oil, I think Bush. But The Bush Agenda was the first book, The Tyranny of Oil the second. You warned in The Tyranny of Oil that this was probably going to happen, Deepwater, right? And it's going to happen again, right?
The first lease that's already been given out for the new leases in the Gulf of Mexico, BP.
There you go. That's all that needs to be said. What can people do? I know a very important part is you and other members showing up at BP's shareholder meeting, even though the proxy people didn't get in, and it's telling that they didn't. Mm-hmm. You're on this show. You've written a book. What's it going to take? I mean, I tip my hat to you for all your good work, all the interviews you did in this book to keep this story alive because it's so important. What can we do to help?
The most important thing, this is the 1-year anniversary. It's a critical moment when the country is once again looking at this issue. It's on the front page of newspapers. It's in stories. The message that the people from the Gulf are saying is one sentence: the oil is still here, and so are we.
Right.
People need to push their members of Congress,
right.
push people they know to actually pass legislation and actually end offshore drilling.
I keep saying what we need are more liberals, more progressives in office, and certainly there are Democrats who are culpable here as well as Republicans in kowtowing to the oil industry. We have an opportunity in 2012 with a new election cycle to get people in who are going to make real changes. They can do it.
Absolutely.
And we can go up against the lobby. They're tough lobbies, the NRA, the banking industry, the oil industry. They're among the toughest we have. But if we don't put the people in office who are going to tilt against